60, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Former President Trump closed the show in Iowa over the weekend with a rally in Indianola, where he essentially made this pitch to the faithful.
Under the Trump administration, you were better off, your family was better off, your neighbors were better off, your communities were better off, and our country was better off. We were never stronger than we were just 3 years ago, energy independent. America was stronger, richer, and safer, and more confident than ever before when I sat behind the Oval desk, that beautiful Oval Office with the resolute desk.
So if you don't feel like you're better off than you were 4 years ago, then let's go back to where we were prior to Biden, and that was with me again. Everything old is new again is the pitch, and probably, fairly compelling with a Republican primary electorate that finds Joe Biden about as attractive as foot fungus. So yes. there's something to be said for that. But of course, now is Trump the best positioned to accomplish what Republicans want accomplished? And I think the problem that Haley and DeSantis continue to have, Ramaswamy too, is, it's hard to say that I'm the only one or I'm the best one who can beat Biden, when in point of fact, for DeSantis, you don't really have the numbers to back it up. And to the extent that Haley has some polling that suggests she beats Biden by a wider margin, You can beat Biden, but I can beat him by a little bit more is just not enough to make a switch for most Republican primary voters, given what Trump accomplished as president and what he's been put through since.
Well, here's her closing argument.
The only way we're going to win the majority of Americans is if we have a new generational leader that leaves the negativity and the baggage behind and focuses on the solutions of the future.
Yeah, that's the typical sort of abstraction that you get from Nikki Haley. It's all so platitudinous and wanting.
Yeah, and let's hear, we heard from those two. Here's DeSantis.
You're never going to have an opportunity where your voice and your vote is going to pack as much of a punch as it will tomorrow night.
Yeah. Well, let's get a local perspective on where things stand. We're pleased to be joined by David Chung, editorial fellow at the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. He's an Iowa native who lives in Cedar Rapids. He's served more than a decade on the Iowa Republican Party State Central Committee as well. David Chung, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Morning. Is there anything happening on the ground that would lead you to suggest that there may be a surprise tonight?
I don't think there'll be a big surprise. The surprise may be that Nikki Haley seems to be gaining ground in Iowa. The Iowa poll shows that, and it's taken a while for her to do that. But I think the expectation here among everybody, including those who are not Trump supporters, is that Trump takes the Iowa caucus going away. The question more for most of us is by how much, not whether he wins.
Well, why hasn't DeSantis gotten more traction, even because of the ground game that he spent so much time putting together over the last several months? Even if he's able to finish second, it more likely than not will be a distant second. Why has he not been able to? And with Vanderplaats endorsing him and all these evangelical leaders and so forth, he just hasn't been able to. What's the disconnect between him and Iowa voters, do you think?
Yeah, you're right. It seems strange because not only does he have Bob Vanderplaats, a huge evangelical leader in Iowa, endorse him, but our governor, a very popular Republican governor, endorsed him, many other legislative and other endorsements. It's just tough to get over. Iowa voters really are Trump fans in the Republican Party. It's a tough hill to climb.
But how rare? I mean, wasn't it rare for Kim Reynolds to endorse a candidate? Because normally the governor of Iowa stays out of it.
That was a surprise.
Right. Well, does she have?
And for some Republicans, probably even a disappointment in that our governors have traditionally not officially endorsed.
And the Iowa voters that are Trump fans, how much of that is attendant to what happened in the last half of last year with the indictments? Do you think this would have been competitive if Trump had not been indicted?
I don't think so. I think that his supporters have become more ardent because of it, but I don't think it's won him a lot of new supporters. And just to clarify, if you've read my columns, I have been a Trump supporter in the past. I am not a Trump supporter now.
And why not?
I think Trump didn't do the party any favors on his way out. Among them was going down and making the Georgia senatorial campaigns about him and not about the candidates. I think he cost us the Senate. 2 races, all we had to do was win one. We could have won them both. We ended up losing both. I don't think he helped there. Trump has made everything has become about him, and maybe it always was.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's the ego and the I stuff. I mean, there's no question. But the flip side is that a lot of what he said in 2016 still has relevance in 2024, and he's bringing it back. And I think he's been able to convince a lot of people, and perhaps, and in large measure, it's because of what he did when he was president, which is, difficult to top that, an actual record to substantiate a claim. But he's been able to basically convince people what he says a lot, which is, remember, they're coming for me, but they're really coming for you, and I'm standing in the way. And I think a majority of Republicans believe that, regardless of his megalomania.
And all along, Republicans have liked the fact that Trump is willing to get in people's faces, that he's not going to sit by quietly and watch things, and willing to stand up and say what a lot of us have wanted to say, but felt uncomfortable saying. On the other hand, from where I sit, it feels to me, watching him since his presidency, that a second Trump term would be the revenge tour. It would not be about making America great, but about restoring Trump to the position that, to the place he thinks he deserves.
Well, yeah, although I would say, I've had my issues with Trump over the years too. When it came down to Trump versus Cruz back in 2016, I was with Cruz. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but the flip side is, like, where we are today, the revenge tour has to be a part of making America great again, if you will. I mean, there has to be a reckoning with the institutional interests in D.C. In order to clear away the possibility of a brighter tomorrow in America. So, I mean, when people say revenge tour, he's vindictive, he better be vindictive. There better be a bit of a revenge tour. Now, you can dress that up in different language, but at the core of it, it's the same. Is you got to get people that are these central planning, identitarian Marxists out of the way if you want to usher in peace and prosperity and national comity.
Yeah, and the other part of this, Dan, is that I believe Trump lost the election. I'm in that camp. I was a presidential elector, and I believe the several states chose their electors, and those electors voted, and the majority of those electoral votes went to Joe Biden. As much as I was not excited about casting a vote that did not re-elect President Trump, that was my hope. I fully believe that my vote. I fully believe that Trump lost the electoral vote, lost the presidency.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, fine. I mean, I don't. Honestly, I mean, the thing about that whole litmus test that goes in both directions. I mean, I'm sort of I'm just sort of unmoved by that either way. It's like I don't, we have a pretty good record of what happened in 2020, the unusual nature of, 60% of the ballots being cast by mail, and the willy-nilly nature in which ballots were sent, and the Zucker boxes, and the harvesting, and Maricopa County, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We could go through it all chapter and verse. But you come down on, somebody says rigging, and somebody says stolen, another says we lost it, or they stole it fair and square, favorite phrase in Cook County. Or it was legitimate within the bounds of the typical chicanery that goes on during elections. Whatever that is, I don't know. I mean, the point is that it prompted improvements in election administration in many of the swing states. We'll see about Maricopa County in Arizona, but certainly that's the case in Georgia and some other states that are relevant here, swing states. But I don't like the people say, oh, Trump relitigates the 2020 election, but then there are people that disagree with his perspective on it that want to relitigate it too. And I don't know where either side gets us to the present.
Sure. And one of the challenges today, and today is caucus day. Every Iowa political person lives for this. It's minus 14 here. Excuse me. The weather's been terrible. I actually drove back from a wedding in Chicago yesterday, and the roads were a mess. So we'll see. Iowans are hardy, but we've not had a caucus day like this for a presidential caucus in the past. And, caucus is all about turnout.
We were talking about this a bit
earlier. A little wild card.
Yeah, we were talking about this a bit earlier. Here was my perspective, having gone to the caucus in 2012 and sat in a grade school in Des Moines and watched people, go through the process of caucusing. And when Amy and I were talking about it, my perspective was, it's almost like it's a social gathering. It's almost like going out to dinner with your friends or something, or going to an event with your friends. And it just seems to me that it's like so different in terms of thinking about turnout, regardless of the inclement weather, that it's almost like, gosh, if I don't show up after I told Joni and Sal that I'd show up, they're going to be upset with me. I mean, it's like it's so neighborhood feel that I just wonder if no matter what's happening outside, people don't show up in basically the normal numbers.
Well, the state party's been predicting record turnouts of right above those of 2016, which was massive. Those have been predictions have been toned down a little bit due to the weather, but everyone is still predicting a very high turnout, which I think favors Trump.
He is David Chung, editorial fellow at the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. He's an Iowa native living there in Cedar Rapids, who served more than a decade on the Republican Party of Iowa's State Central Committee. David Chung, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your insights. Appreciate it. Have fun tonight.
Hey, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.